Usually I get a little thing that says recording, but I'm on a different, on a web-based version this time. Does that mean it's recording? Event recording is in progress.
It's
Okay,
in
great.
process.
Okay, great. So my name is Cynthia Kress. Welcome to the, let's see, May 19th meeting of the Issaquah Transportation Advisory Board. Of course, it's Issaquah. I always say the whole thing. I'm currently the interim chair of this board due to a funky gap in the timing for electing chair and vice chair. I also wanted to thank Micah for taking over for me, and Joseph. Neither of us was able to attend last in April, and I appreciate Micah covering for us. There is a change in the agenda. Isabel, would you just maybe reorder the normal business for us? Tell us what order we're going to be doing that in?
Yes. We will be starting with, we can start with the chair and vice chair nominations or elections. And then we will have John's item following that with the ADA self-transition evaluation and transition plan and the transportation improvement program. That's
And
the
can you
switch
remind me
that
who?
sorry,
And
go
then
ahead.
Isabel, are you doing concurrency? Who's doing concurrency, and then you're doing ITS, right?
I will be doing ITS following that and then concurrency.
Okay, excellent. So we're really all we're doing is moving the TIP up to after the ADA, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Very good. Okay, I'm gonna have to toggle back and forth. See if I can find my agenda. Oh, this is terrible. Okay, so we normally, so now it's time for item number 2, approval of the minutes. Normally I do that by unanimous consent to make it more efficient, but since I wasn't here in April, I would like to entertain a motion from someone else to approve the minutes as presented. And I'll be looking for a motion and a second.
I move that the minutes be approved as written.
Thank
And
you.
I second.
And second from Jerry. Everybody approve?
I do not approve.
Ah, okay.
My last name is spelled wrong.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's fine. Mydlil, just for future reference.
It's probably a more formal way to do this, but how about if we redo the motion with the said noted change? And I do think it's important, and I love it when people tell me that they've spelled the name wrong, even though I didn't write this. But so I do appreciate that, Julian. I think I can call for the motion again with that minor change.
Can I also ask, so I think I'm listed as an unexcused absence, but I did email, I think a day or so in advance. I had a work event. I don't know what like designates like excused versus unexcused. So I don't know if like we need to clarify that or if it just stays as unexcused.
Yes, and thank you for that, Erica. I will check on that email, and if it is an email, it would be an excuse absence.
So why don't we table that? Can we just bring, in June, can we just do May and April? Is everyone okay with that? Because it
I'm
sounded
okay
like
with that. That's fine.
it sounded like Isabel wanted to look something up, and John, being the textualist, probably can tell us what excused is. Do you know what excused is, John?
I do not.
Okay, and I don't want to be a super, hard nosed about it. I think the main thing to keep in mind for all of us to remember is, of course, we're volunteers and life happens. And Erica, I don't want to pick on you, but the reason is because the meeting, if we don't have a quorum, the effort would be to go to reschedule. You probably already know that, but anyway, does anybody object to tabling that to the next round so she can just? Not that anything happens if it's unexcused, but. Okay, seeing as there are no objections to that, why don't we move on to public comment? I do have a brief, I want to mention a comment that came in, but other than that, do we have anybody on tonight who wants to make a public comment?
I don't see anyone listed out to bring public comments.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, so some of you may have seen, or you may have not had a chance to see, there was an email from Corey Christensen about the Squawk Mountain sidewalk. And I just want to make sure that you guys, I don't want to call it to your attention. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please go ahead and do so at your own leisure. I'm not going to summarize that. I do that. I don't like to summarize because I don't ever feel confident summarizing, distilling somebody else's point of view. And it wasn't super long, but it was long enough that, so I like to just make sure people know that it's there. And I would encourage everybody to make sure you take the time to read through the detailed comments. And we appreciate Corey Christensen submitting that as well. Okay, well, that brings us to, I think, regular business. I guess I'll make last call for a public comment. There was none, correct?
No.
Okay. That brings us to, I believe, the chair and vice chair nomination, right?
Yes. And during last meeting, Cynthia, you may have known that we have received a nomination for you, Cynthia Cross, as our chair, and another nomination for Julian for the vice chair position. And what we would like to do before proceeding with the formal process is to ask if there are any other nominations before we continue. Hearing none, nominations are closed. And Cynthia, just to make sure you had expressed earlier that you would be accepting your nomination, and just wanted to make sure that is still the case.
Yes.
Okay, got it. And if so, do we still want to, since we have only one nomination, do we would still want to express the interest from the nominees, or we can proceed with just announcing? Would you?
I
Would the
wouldn't
tab?
mind sharing a few comments. I think it will help me feel accountable. And I don't know if Julian feels the same way. Are you talking about our expressions of interest? Julian, how do
Yes.
you feel about it? Right.
I mean, I don't really have much of a statement per se, so I mean, I can deliver some offhand remarks, but yeah.
I don't like to put people on the spot, but I guess we are on the spot. So Isabel, then would we do that now?
If you want to, yes. If you are, yes. You up to it, yes. If not, we can continue.
I was just going to say that real quick that I would be very happy to continue serving. I am happy to serve on this board, whether or not I'm in a leadership role or not. I really like it a lot. I do think rotation of leadership is important, so I'm hoping that we can, you know, I don't intend to do this forever. I do think that there's two things I wanted to share that I'm interested in. And then you can maybe hold me accountable if you think I've forgotten. You can help me remember. And one is we are starting to see some vacancies, and I want to make sure that we're recruiting so that and I don't know if we'll be able to fill those vacancies prior to the next go around, but even if we can't, I mean, I think we still are going to have no trouble getting to a quorum every time, hopefully, but we just need to make this a robust, and I think I just thought that they would come rolling in, and I didn't really do as much last time as I would have hoped. And the other thing is I think there's I looked back at John's suggestion at the whatever the formation legislation is, the IMC 292050 that just says what our responsibilities are. And I would like, there are a couple of things where we connect our work back to council, both in the form of recommendations and also meeting with them. And I think we've kind of let go of that. And so I'm glad that you want to give me another chance to help this board deliver against all of our objectives. And now that I've been kind of figured out how to run a meeting, now I'd like to set my sights on just those two objectives in the next year. And I just wanted to share that. And I also just want to say thank you. I appreciate, I think Julian nominated me, and maybe somebody else seconded. I'm not sure. Oh, I've forgotten. I read the notes, but and I just want to say thank you, and I'm happy to serve. And I'm it just sort of works in my life right now. But I also want to make sure that obviously we don't want to keep having the same person in leadership for a long time. So rotation of leadership is important in the future. So that's all I had to share. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia. And Julian, just to be safe, sure, you wouldn't
Yeah,
want to make an
I'll
expression?
deliver a couple comments. So I guess I pretty much agree with what Cynthia was saying about, making our connection to council much more solid and trying to collaborate and trying to connect with the city council as much as we can, especially with the new committee formats that they've established, and trying to make clear, what our recommendations are and what we're thinking about. And I think that we can do a lot of better job, in terms of reaching out to various mobility related communities in Issaquah for the recruitment process as we go forward. I think having a full board is very important to be representational of the city of Issaquah. And that's basically my solid tenant right there. And I think I really want our agenda items to be reflective of, trying to become more of a multimodal friendly city, and not just in words, but in action. And so I'm looking forward to serving as vice chair.
Thank you, Julian. And to make this official, Cynthia, you have been elected as the chair through the end of April of next year. Congratulations. And Julian, you have been elected as vice chair through the end of April next year. Congratulations. So
We don't have to vote if it's only one nominee.
no,
I mean, that would be silly, but what if nobody liked either of us?
no, we don't need to
Do
vote.
it then. No. Okay. Very good. I believe, are we closed on that item?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Now it sounds like we're on to the next item in our regular business, the ADA transition plan.
Good evening, TAB members. I'm John Mortensen, Transportation Engineering Manager. Tonight, I'm going to give a brief update on the work we're doing for the city's ADA transition, self-evaluation and transition plan. This is an item that we had on the agenda in April, but there are a number of absences, and this is a really important project, so I wanted to do an abbreviated presentation on it at tonight's meeting. Are you able to see the notes page or the presentation? Okay, good.
We're seeing not the presentation slide. It's like if there were notes, they would be we'd be looking at
Perfect.
them.
Okay, let me get those swapped. That fix it?
Mhm.
Nope.
No.
Interesting. Okay. Let me stop.
We
and
can
I'll share
see
the-
it.
Well, there's a different way I can share it. I tried sharing the application. I'll share the screen. How about now? All right, perfect. A little bit of background. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, I want to say it was 1990. And with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the intent is to remove barriers for people with disabilities. As part of the city's requirement for the Americans with Disabilities Act, we're required to do a self-evaluation and transition plan, which is where we identify the barriers, whether it's a physical barrier to someone with a mobility disability or a communication barrier, and then look at how we can make the remove the barriers and provide a schedule to go ahead and remove the barriers. So for an example, since it's the Transportation Advisory Board, on our public sidewalk, if you get to an intersection and there's not a curb ramp, that would be a barrier to someone with a mobility disability. And we would want to put in a curb ramp to remove the barrier. Another one, if you're at a traffic signal and you're at an older one, you push the pedestrian push button, it won't help someone who's visually impaired. But if you're at a newer traffic signal with the newer type of pedestrian push buttons, if you push and hold it for about 3 seconds, it'll start giving voice commands for when a person can cross the intersection. This project, though, it looks at more than just the public right-of-way. It looks at city facilities, the city's parks, services, and a number of other services that the city has. The project schedule, so from February through April 20 of this year, we worked with a consultant to look at the 2014 ADA self-evaluation transition plan that was put together and to look at what from that needed to be updated and develop a scope of work. Starting this month, the consultant is working to develop the plan. They will be assessing the city's facilities, prioritizing the improvements, and developing a barrier and removal financial plan for the public right-of-way, city buildings, parks, trails, and programmatic components. From November through January, the draft plan will be reviewed by what we're calling the ADA Advisory Group, the City Council, as well as the general public, with the intent to have Council adopt the plan in February 2023. The final thing that I have is we're going to put together an ADA advisory group. The ADA advisory group will consist of members from the Transportation Advisory Board are invited, as well as the city's equity board and members of the disability community in Issaquah. The commitment is 3 to 5 virtual meetings on probably WebEx or similar type setting to advise the team on accessibility barriers, refine the project, the removal prioritization, and the recommendations, and help promote the project through relationships with other organizations. And the ask that I have is if anyone from the Transportation Advisory Board would like to be a part of the ADA advisory, trying to stop sharing my screen. There we go. If anyone from the Transportation Advisory Board would like to be a part of the ADA advisory group, please reach out to me. Also, if you know of anyone who would be a good member of the ADA advisory group, please refer to that person to me so that way we can get a good group to help guide this project. And with that, are there any questions? It's like Julian, you had one?
Yeah, I had one. So you presented, this was presented like last month, I believe. What has changed since then, or what progress has been made since last time that you presented it?
Probably the primary thing is that we got the contract signed with the consultant to do the phase 2 of the work. And we're still in the process of gathering or working to build up the ADA advisory group.
And if I can chime into that, Gillian, on our last meeting also, while Micah was leading the meeting, he did ask that we bring the question back to the tab, since there were some members that were missing, and in case any other members wanted to express their interest in being part of the committee.
Cynthia, I have a question. Is there anyone on this board who has stepped up? Because I think the first question is, are there is anyone interested? And then if not, I don't think we should let that go by. I think we should do a little recruiting.
I believe we do have
Anybody?
one volunteer.
Is that appropriate to share that now? I have a suspicion I know who it is. But is there any reason not to share? I mean, I just want to move along on this and make sure you get what you need. And I'm not seeing why we would want to hold off on that.
So I have just a quick question. Was that a volunteer or a draftee?
Yeah. I just can't think of anybody better to help us out with this.
Thank you. And I did volunteer last meeting, if you remember right. I was
I
very
wasn't here.
tired last meeting.
Thank you.
I do
I don't think
volunteer.
that's excellent. If that was in the notes, and I did read them, I forgot, but I wasn't here and I couldn't find the video to watch, so I missed that. I really, really appreciate that, and I'm just wondering, John, I'm guessing that folks are either some combination of busy or feel unqualified. Do you need more than one person from the tab? It sounds like there's a spot if somebody else wants to, but are you looking for more draftees?
I don't need more, but at the same time, more would be welcome. And I think David would do a great job representing the tab.
I do too. Yeah. I do too. Okay. I feel like it would be hard for me to, I just don't think I would bring much to it. So that's my hesitation personally, but, great. Well, I think David will do an excellent job. All right. I only had one other question, but before I ask that, does anybody else have any questions for John on this topic? Sounds like David's got one.
Thanks, Cynthia. Hey, John, I've already got one barrier that needs to be addressed. And I can do that offline with you, but it's something that really needs to be addressed. I already stumbled on it in this past month. Not literally, but I stumbled on it. And
Okay.
it's an important barrier for the city, and we need to overcome it.
I appreciate that. Look forward to having you let me know about it. Yes, Julia?
Looks like Julian's got a question.
So at the last meeting when you were discussing this, there was talk of the coverage, or I don't know what it was officially called. It was last done in 2014. Is it still on the timeline of how it was said last time around?
For completing the project?
Or not completing the project, the what was it called? Just a report of the current conditions and current gaps. I think it was,
Oh,
yeah.
so in the phase one, the consultant really dove into looking at what data from 2014 they could reuse and what data from 2014 really needed to be updated. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think generally a lot of it we still will be able to use. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess you won't, they'll still be making a new one, right? That's
Oh,
it.
for the prioritization?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess through the process, we'll see, it could be that the original prioritization still applies. There could be changes, but there's nothing to say that it couldn't change this time.
John, I had a question. You might have said this and I read all materials at once, so forgive me if you've already said this, but I was a little confused about how this gets, I assume that it leads to a series of projects that need to be implemented, and I assume those are essentially capital projects. Does it end up having to compete with all other capital projects? Is there a separate funding source? How does that work?
That's a good question, and lots of different ways to answer it. So it could be a separate project. For example, we have an annual ADA improvement project where we go about, and this is a transportation project where we upgrade curb ramps and pedestrian push buttons. It could be part of a facility project, but part of the transition plan is also looking at what will other projects construct. And so if we have a project along a corridor, we know that project will be upgrading the curb ramps, and we'll take that into consideration. As a big player in upgrading a lot of the curb ramps will be development as they build things. The facilities, I think it'd be a similar type thing in the parks where we have a parks project that the upgrades would be during then or during that time. It also could be a separate project. I don't want to speculate too much on parks because I don't have a role to play in how they prioritize their projects. But I guess to answer your question, it'll be an existing project that we have. It could potentially be a new project, and it'll also be other projects in development that'll help remove the barriers.
Thank you. John, did you get what you needed on this topic? I think we might be
Yes,
nearing
I
the
did.
close. Okay. Thanks again, David. Like I said, I can't think of a better person to help us out with that. Sounds like we're on to TIP.
Okay, go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, do a quick check to make sure it's sharing the slide and not the notes page.
Yes, it's the correct one.
Okay, all right. Welcome to Transportation Advisory Board meeting. Members, I'm here to give a brief update on the work that we've been doing for the Transportation Improvement Program. The purpose is really to provide an update because as a board, you have put in a lot of time and effort into the Transportation Improvement Program, and I wanted to give an update for where things are at in the process. The background, last summer/fall, the tab worked to update project descriptions. And then at the tab meeting last February, worked with the tab to confirm that we did receive the right feedback. We also met with the environmental board at their April meeting to talk about the transportation improvement program as it relates to the natural environment. And based on the feedback that we received from the tab and the environmental board, the proposed 6-year transportation improvement program was put together. I do want to say that because the city is not also updating the capital improvement plan, this update is a minor update to the transportation improvement program that when the city updates the capital improvement plan, we do a bigger update to the transportation improvement program. So when you look at it, not a whole lot will have changed. The Transportation Improvement Program was presented to the new Council Mobility and Infrastructure Committee at their meeting on May 10th. The committee recommended setting a public hearing and not making changes to the Transportation Improvement Program. The public hearing is scheduled for June 6th with the anticipation of Council adopting the Transportation Improvement Program at their meeting on June 20th. The Environmental Board provided quite a bit of feedback on the transportation improvement program. A lot of it was regarding wanting to better understand the project selection and prioritization criteria, as well as working with the Transportation Advisory Board to incorporate the Issaquah's new climate action plan into how we prioritize transportation projects. The Environmental Board was also interested in how the city evaluates environmental impacts for projects. They would like to see greenhouse gas emissions generated from a transportation improvement as we consider the different projects. That way, if we're comparing two projects, we'd know how much greenhouse gas emissions would result from the different alternatives. The Environmental Board is commented about promoting alternative modes of transportation and as well as considering wildlife corridors as we design our transportation projects. During the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee, there were questions about the timing and process with the state requirement of adopting the TIP this summer. I think the committee felt like it's a little bit rushed, but part of the reason is this is a minor update and there's not much changing compared to what would happen if the CIP was also getting updated. There's a number of concerns from the audience comments as well as members of the committee about some of the future year projects that have roadway widening. Another discussion was the upcoming recommendations from the capital finance plan. And so that's going to be updated in June, but as part of the TIP, there was a little bit of a sneak peek in that the TIP did include a recommendation to do a planning study for the Central Issaquah multimodal I-90 crossing. That's a name change for the project. Originally, it was an I-90 over-under crossing between, I want to say, 10th and 12th, but this project is to create a new crossing of I-90 that would incorporate hopefully Sound Transit's light rail as well as Metro bus vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. And that project was listed in the TIP to begin work. Another thing that was discussed at the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee was staff capacity, that there were some changes from last year's TIP where work was reduced to reflect current staff capacity to actually get the work done. Another new project was to do a seismic retrofit on the Gilman Bridge that goes over Front Street. The city recently had a bridge engineer do a seismic evaluation, and we would like to upgrade the bridge to meet seismic criteria. It also will need a load rating until we can do some work for heavy emergency vehicles. This year, we put in an application to get funds to do the rehabilitation of the bridge. There was also talk about transit and other things that the city is doing to help mobility in the community. And then the final thing that was discussed is asking the question, is the community aware of the Mobility Master Plan's vision that with the direction to go to a more multimodal direction? And that was one of the questions that the committee had asked. The timing and next steps. The public hearing is set for June 6th, where the public will be able to make comments on the proposed TIP. The schedule has the TIP getting adopted at the June 20th meeting. Before the next round, when the CIP and TIP will be updated, the work will be done to incorporate the Issaquah Climate Action Plan with the Mobility Master Plan. And with that, are there any questions?
Go ahead, John. Just David's waving his arm there.
Okay, yeah, David?
John, could you repeat those transit priorities that I saw on the screen?
That was just, I guess, more of the mobility committee talking about different things that, like the shuttle program that we're working to design and the transit study that the city's doing, not necessarily capital projects, if I remember right. And if I'm mistaken, I do see Julian's got his hand raised. He was there too.
Yeah, I remember quite specifically what they were referring to because I was at the meeting. I was listening in. It was a conversation about how this is like more of a capital plan, right? And it's kind of tricky to think about what the city of Issaquah could be funding in terms of capital transit projects versus just operations, which is more typical for a municipal government, you know, in terms of the Shuttle 200 or anything else that we might be doing. So I think that's basically what the question was down to. But I feel like we could be doing some capital stuff. I mean, I'm not sure how much jurisdiction we have over like the bus shelters, um, or you know the bus stops, you know, providing shelter there for the people who are stopping there. Um, that's something to be explored. You know, amenities at transit stops. I think that would be an interesting thing to consider for capital projects.
I think Jerry had a comment.
Yes, I did. I'm not sure if this is the place, but last year I was always wondering about this too, before the I-90 crossing was called a multimodal crossing. So I was curious if Issaquah had done a study and was convinced we really needed that extra crossing. Maybe when I drive around Issaquah, I'm fine with that new crossing by the post office. I think it works fine. And so I'm just surprised that Issaquah needs another one. And I thought, you know, maybe our funds could be going somewhere else. So I guess you have that on the list because a study's been done and in the future you're going to need it. And so that's my question.
I will briefly answer it without giving too much away because it actually relates to our transportation concurrency. That the city has a transportation concurrency model, which is where the need for the I-90 crossing originated from, where the city has a level of service. And in order to accommodate the growth, especially with the concentration of growth on the valley floor, and in particular within the regional growth center, that there'll be a lot of growth in that vicinity. Another thing also is there's a big benefit to improving a grid, especially in a denser setting. And right now, the I-90 really divides the regional growth center, which is where the most intensive growth will occur. And so by having the extra crossing, that helps put in a little bit more of a grid where right now the freeway is a barrier. And also, there's only one crossing within the regional growth center, and that is at SR 900 because the other crossing at 4th is outside the regional growth center. And this is the only location that, in my opinion, makes sense to have multimodal for bicycles and pedestrians because at the interchange, it's very much an area of cars trying to get on and off the freeway. Did that answer your question?
I do, but when you're talking concurrency, so you're saying we don't need it now, but we'll need it in the future? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay, because of the increased population you expect in the valley floor.
Correct.
Basically. Right. But we don't need it now, but it's good to plan for it 10 years from now. right? Or 15 or something like
Whenever
that.
it
So
happens, yes.
it's in the tip, but it's not going to be implemented for quite a while. So,
Right, it'll take a while to develop a funding package to construct a project like that.
okay. And by then
Just
it'll
that-
be needed.
Some of the long range design is in the current tip. Is that correct, John? It's not, the construction's not in the current tip.
Right, construction's in the future years, and in the tip that was adopted last year, it included funding to do a planning study. And we've since refined what we need to do for this project.
Jerry, you're nodding, so I'm gonna assume you got your question answered, and I'm actually really happy to hear Christy is got a comment because I know this is something she knows a lot about. So Christy, is this a comment on this topic?
Yes, it is. I just wanted to weigh in on maybe from more of an old timer perspective in the community and someone who's gone to many, many meetings. When back as far as 2007, 2008, when the Central Issaquah Planning Task Force first met, one of the conversations amongst the group, but also continually from public comment, was I-90 really is bifurcated our community. If you think about, we've got the north and the south, and they're really not well connected from a circulation perspective, whether that be car, bike, peds. So that was one comment. The other was the community asked, how can we find a way to kind of stitch back our community in a way that makes sense and is integrated? And when, so there was a lot of factors that went into sort of the thoughtfulness and the placement of that location and what our general residents needed in terms of local circulation. So it was studied back then in the concurrency run. It was also looked at as a potential for future light rail when the conversations had happened. I'm trying to think, what else can I share with you? But there's been a lot of study in terms of how do you support our community and also at the same point in time do something that really helps facilitate connectivity. So if you think about, a lot of people referenced the lids at Mercer Island and said, why can't we have something like that? Or, why can't we do something different? And so this was a solution to accommodate that, but at the same time also not compromise the business district or have a major situation where there was a property taking. So how do you add to your community as opposed to detracting from it? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Thank you, Chrissy.
You're welcome. But I think the community still, there's opportunity for communication. There has been study. I think a lot of people are excited about the potential, but it's a concept that needs further planning and study, as John had mentioned.
It's like Julian's got a question.
Yeah, so I was looking at the future projects and I definitely saw a lot of the new roads there. I think those are good in the sense that, they're going to help facilitate a new system in the central Issaquah area. But there's still a number of roadway expansions, as you said earlier. And I'm just really trying to derive like what the premise is of all of these. Is it mostly derived from the concurrency idea or what else?
Yes, it comes from the concurrency, that those are projects that our concurrency model have said we need to do in order to maintain the level of service that the city has set as a standard.
And we do have a multimodal concurrency standard, right?
It's a well, I'll let Isabel's presentation
Yeah,
over
actually, let's
it,
not
but
spoil too much.
yeah.
So, in the infeasible or implausible suggestion that we might drop our level of service, would these projects still be happening?
I would say it depends on the project, and I think it would take a lot of work to evaluate to see what we could do. There's ways. So when the traffic modeler models the concurrency system, there are a number of inputs, which the number of trips generated, which is based on the land use, the assumed percentage of multimodal transportation. I believe the current model had it where the multimodal percentage would double, but there are ways to play with it. And I will, and I don't want to give away too much for the presentation later on tonight, that the update that we're doing this year is more of a technical nature, not really getting into those details. In the long run, I think it, and if I remember right, the Mobility Master Plan actually talked about revisiting the city's concurrency system for how to make it better for multimodal. And there's a number of ways to do it, but that's not what the current project is. It's something that I anticipate will be done sometime in the future.
So I'm not seeing anybody else in the comment or anybody else raising their hand. I just want to, it sounds like we're getting ready to conclude on this topic, but I just want to put this out there, and it's sort of related to the comment that I made earlier in accepting a nomination for chair, and that's that I think this is one of those really, the 2023 CIP is really something this group is going to want to sink their teeth into. So, maybe we should have like a good sit down with Julian, me, you, Isabel, and map out the year with a lot of thought. And we always do that. We always look at the year, and we always have a meeting before the meeting. But I think we want to, and then we've got to think about who we're advising. We're advising council. What does council want from the tab? Like, I want to. I think there's some of these comments are getting at this sense that we don't necessarily feel ownership of these programs, these plans, and I think it would be a nice goal for the 2023 CIP TIP to feel like that was a recommendation, was a product from this board where we had a chance to really dig into it and understand the whys, and not certainly revisit everything, but just really feel like we've had a chance to dig into the details and be involved, and then some owner, I don't want to say ownership because you guys do all the work, but yeah, I think you get what I'm saying. So I just kind of want to note that, and then we can talk about that further.
Yeah, like just based on what I've been hearing here and, in the council committee session, it does seem like a lot of it seems inevitable with all these projects and the plans. So I think it'd be very useful to set up a meeting and make sure that we know what's going on in 2023 and how we can best coordinate that for the best outcomes.
Without throwing any babies out with bathwater. I mean, obviously, like Christy just reminded us, like how much history had gone into that. So I think some of it's going to be education. And anyway, I don't think we want to hash that out in too much detail right now. But I don't have any more questions about the interim TIP. Does anybody else have anything, or John, do you anything else from this group?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, John, and I hope you feel better soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Cut you loose. Looks like we're on to ITS, right?
Yes, and before we do that, I know we talked about introducing her at the beginning of the meeting, but then we forgot. So before we continue any further, I will be introducing to the tab our new member to our transportation team, which is Shuo Wan. She is joining us from Minnesota, and we are very excited to have her. She will be filling my position as a senior transportation engineer, and she started with us at the beginning of this month. So yeah, you will be seeing a new face soon.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, welcome, Shuo.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome.
Okay. And with that, I will start sharing my screen with the presentation. Let me know when you can see everything.
Can see it. We can see.
You can? Okay, thank you, Jerry. So before I start with the ITS plan, I just want to clarify that this is only just a very short, very brief summary of what we presented during the last meeting. And the reason why we're doing this is because when we were wrapping up the agenda, and we talked about bringing the ADA transition plan question. We also thought, yes, it might be a good idea since both topics, we presented them for the very first time during last meeting. We want to just briefly summarize the key items from each of these two and provide an opportunity, especially for those who didn't get the chance to provide their feedback during the last meeting, do this tonight. And yes, so again, sorry for without introducing myself. Isabel Diaz, Traffic Signal Operations Engineer, and I will briefly be speaking about the ITS plan. Okay. So ITS, first of all, it stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems, and it is considered the use of technology to integrate communications and into the transportation infrastructure and with vehicles as well. Some of the traditional ITS solutions that exist, we are providing a few examples of those. One of those is communications network. Fiber is basically the standard in communications from the equipment that exists on the road to a traffic management center. Vehicle detection technologies such as pavement loops, radar, and video. Traffic signal controllers. These advanced traffic signal controllers leverages the operating system to log signal detector events such as vehicle presence, phase changes, preemption, transit priority, and variable lanes. CCTV cameras, those are used to observe transportation network from a remote location, such as a traffic management center. And they are also used to proactive safety applications. Dynamic message signs, you have seen those. We have about four throughout the city. Traffic management centers, this can be an operator computer station or a video wall, depending on the size of the agency, to better observe signal operations or connect with other agencies. The city has basically already invested in all of these ITS solutions, or I should say, basically most of these ITS solutions. The only ones that I have mentioned that we have not yet invested on are transit priority and variable lanes. So those are two technologies that we don't currently have. Do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. That was a goof. Tom was struggling and we were private messaging, but obviously not very private. Sorry about that. Tom was having technical difficulties and I was offering suggestions, so I'm a little embarrassed, but it's nothing.
No worries. I thought that you might have a question. So these are only the traditional ITS technology that exists, but one of the things that, or the main goal of the ITS plan is that it will be evaluating that new technology that what is that new technology that exists out there that the city should be invested on. And to bring just an example of some of the new ITS technologies that we currently don't have, there's the automatic traffic signal performance measures. And this is basically combining the detection with advanced signal controllers. Data sharing can be used to identify the measure of performance of our system. Also, the connected and autonomous vehicles. Our agencies are already looking at initiatives and policies of technologies like connected and electric vehicles. Third-party data providers. These can help with providing an insight on how the overall network of our system is performing without the need to invest in heavy equipment, without the need of being these huge investments. Video analytics. This is something very interesting that the cities of Bellevue and Seattle are currently piloting with the use of cameras to identify conflicts that exist between movements. So I think we touched base a little bit on that on some ideas that we have presented with technology in the past briefly. For this application, an example with with what currently the city of Bellevue is doing, they are providing video feeds to a third-party vendor that would identify the occurrence of near misses and their frequency, so that the city staff can identify those locations where with highest potentials of conflict and make sure they are providing safety improvements at the right locations. In terms of the schedule, this plan has already kicked off. We kicked off with starting with an inventory of the existing conditions. Parts of the inventory does take care of is the inventory of our current traffic signal system, how the communications network is doing, the equipment on the field is related to signals and technology and data platforms and sources. In fall, we will be starting with some stakeholder engagement. When we say stakeholder, we are speaking about both internal and external stakeholders. It would be different departments from the city, like fire, emergencies, and police departments, and also community development departments. And we will also be engaging external stakeholders, including WashDOT, including King County, and the city of Sammamish. We also have a close coordination with our city as well. Part of this engagement, this stakeholder engagement, the main goal to this is so we can identify what the goals and the objectives of our plan are going to be, and also to make sure that we identify those needs from the users. And one other thing that I should mention is that the tab would also be part of this. Later on during this timing in fall that we will be doing stakeholder engagement, we will also be engaging the tab as the community members to provide that feedback from community members of what are the city needs in terms of technology. Then during winter, we will be working on the implementation plan. And this is also another part where we will be engaging the tab, but in something differently. It's because we will be providing a list of projects. One of the outputs of the plan will be this list of ITS project to be included later on the CIP, the capital in the next capital improvement plan. and we will be engaging the tab so we can prioritize those projects. So you can help us determine which projects we should be investing on. And what we want to do with these projects are that we can identify projects into possibly like 3 categories. What are those quick wins or those projects that are pretty easily to accomplish and can be done quickly and without major investments. And also we will be identifying those projects that will be considered like long-term projects, projects that will be considered with like a huge investments, or projects that we will need some grant support as well. And those projects that will be considered program projects that will be continuous. And the idea is that we can continue the ITS program with the beginning of this roadmap that the ITS plan will be, that we can continue and year by year with the ITS program. And with that, and having kind of giving you a brief idea of what type of technology exists out there, and we will have the opportunity to dive a little bit more into this technology later. But for now, to make it simple from the tab, what we would like to know is what is the number 1 transportation related issue or concern that technology could address. And if we can hear from those that didn't have the opportunity to speak on the last meeting, would be desirable. Let me, oh, did I lose everyone, or can we see our faces?
We're still seeing your desktop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're seeing your chat with John. I won't read it.
Sorry about that.
Now we're seeing all your emails.
There it is. Stop sharing.
Are we all getting worse at this? I think it's time to go back to in person. Not just you, Isabel. I'm not picking on you. I feel like the same thing.
I think
Had a
it's
rough time
general,
tonight.
Cynthia.
I've seen Dave raising his hand. Go ahead, Dave.
Thanks, Cynthia. Just a quick question, Isabel. So you're asking what you think the number 1 priority for ITS solutions when you look at that list that you gave us, or are you asking what transportation problem is number 1 that we can apply this ITS solution to?
Yes, that would be the one. What is the problem that we can identify as the main problem that we could solve with technology?
Are you guys all just being polite, or did you all, I gotta say, I have a little bone to pick with the video department at City of Issaquah. I tried a couple times to watch the meeting last time, and then Isabel, once you told me how to find it on YouTube, I didn't have time anymore. So I feel a little at a loss, because it sounds like there were some ideas put forth last time, but I'm kind of just looking to see if anybody else has a comment. Erica, did you already have your comment? It was 2 minutes ago. Go ahead. Yes.
I was gonna say, I guess if you're looking for feedback, I feel like the number 1 thing would be safety. That's often, the number 1 thing that's addressed via like any of the things that we review or give input on, right? And so I think you showed some examples of like those near misses, or like they calculate like down to the second even of like how much time it would take for it to be an actual collision. That's fascinating to me. I'm also wondering, I don't know if this is a solution to a problem. I'm curious about how, if we invest in things like that, does it make us more competitive for different grants, like where we would now have like almost like video evidence of things? I don't know if that's possible. Like I'm not in the transportation planning universe, and like how that works, I guess government grant wise, but like if you could like, I think it, helps build the case. Like, look, we have all these different like video feeds on how if you give us X amount of dollars, we'll use it to correct this. Yeah.
I don't know specifically with the video, like having the video fees that would be more competitive with the grants, but I do know that this start what we are doing, the ITS plan, having this plan in place, that we are considering projects. This is a start to putting us in a competitive site to apply for grants related to ITS.
David?
Dave, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. I unmuted. One thing that I can think of that's huge and has been with us for years, it's the queuing off of Second Avenue, Front Street, and Newport, where we funnel 3 roads into 1 road. I get it that it's pass-through traffic, but that's a huge thing that's been bounced back and forth for years on how we address that, especially evening traffic. Morning traffic, you're going the other way. So the queuing really is outside Issaquah. But if you're going home in the evening, that's a real issue to resolve, is to get that queuing straightened out with either signal control or something, because it's never really gone away. Still there. In fact, if we just go downtown right now, you'll still see the residual of that, and we're at 7:15 p.m. Do you understand what I mean by the queuing of those 3 roads? Okay. It's a military term. You're funneling 3 roads into 1. And it's causing congestion, massive congestion in the core of the city. Newport gets backed up, Front Street gets backed up, Second Avenue gets backed up. I get it that it's all pass-through traffic, but it's still queuing. And I'm wondering if technology can't help us get out of this. Light signal, getting the lights to figure out a way that they're feeding in so that that traffic keeps moving. I don't see the change coming because I know long-term the county is not going to widen Issaquah Hobart Road. I think we all know that. But the queuing in the city that backs it up, I think I've explained it to death here. I think that's a major problem, never to be gone away. Remember the bypass thing that we were going to do several years ago, which turned into a nightmare? I'm just wondering if technology can't help us with this. And just to give you a little history, I used to worry about getting home from football practice on Front Street that there wouldn't be any cars coming out of Issaquah going south on the Hobart Road. And that's the honest to God truth. That is not a worry today.
Julian, go ahead.
I kind of want to engage in this discussion, like if technology would actually be any sort of, so if it would alleviate the fact, that you have basically how many lanes? 3 lanes going basically all into just 1 lane. It just seems implausible that you could fix that sort of situation even with technology. I mean, I don't know. I do know that Highway 18, of course, is being widened, but this pass-through issue is gonna be perennial, with all the growth that's still happening in the south end. So I don't know.
I'm glad you said that about engaging, Julian, because I was kind of thinking the same thing. I actually had a similar issue, but a kind of a different approach than Dave. But I'm also going to read Tom's, just so we put it into the record. Would likely need to coordinate signals between Front and Sunset through State Route 18 signal. So Tom was having technical issues, and so he weighed in on the chat with that comment. I was just going to say, I mean, I think that it's very difficult and technology is probably not going to solve that problem, like you said, Julian. But I was just sort of wondering, I don't know how blue sky this discussion is supposed to be, but so I wasn't really sure what's on the table, but I wrote a note when I was preparing for this, like, is there some way for people maybe who aren't pass through or have more discretion over when they can travel to do like cameras so that you can see how terrible it is? And if you need to run an errand, you can look at this camera and say, oh, well, I think I'll go tomorrow, or I'll go at 7 or 9, or, like, obviously a huge percentage of the traffic doesn't have that choice, but maybe some people do. So there was just this idea that is camera technology a way to help people make better decisions? Because really what we hope to do is increase mobility in Issaquah, right? And we can't necessarily reduce vehicular congestion, but we should make the system we have, the network we have, work as strong and as hard as it can through technology solutions. And Erica has a comment, but I just want to say one more thing. It's a little bit different than that comment. Um, I don't have I know you just went through the schedule. I don't have it committed to memory, but this sort of feels to me like something the community would be super interested in blue sky, like just like survey or something. This seems like both based on our community and the nature of this, it feels a little more blue sky than some of the other kinds of like, hey, build a tram that goes up to Talus, or like it kind of just seems like maybe a good chance to really broaden this and put it out there. But I don't know what that does to, as an ITS professional, that might seem a little, I don't know, like blue sky might be not super useful. Like, but I just wanted to ask that question because of all the things we talk about. This question seems really suited for a broad audience of people that might have good ideas that none of us has thought of. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, and then hand it over to Erica, who had a comment.
I actually realized this was probably more of a question. I first want to definitely second what Cynthia just said about this. Seems like a topic that's rife for people would have a lot of opinions on it. And I know like one of our jobs is to be able to channel, like what Issaquah thinks and then pass it on up to city council. But I think that, expanding, who you're asking that question to is important. Because one of the things, this is like a segue into my comment / question, is how is the city addressing folks just concerned about like, I guess like kind of like ever creeping technology, like paying attention to like what you're doing and where you're going, and that's something I can just like picture coming up, like, oh, like is this Issaquah tracking me now and like my daily driving habits or whatnot? I guess I'm not concerned about that. Obviously, there's red light cameras, and if you have a go pass for 405 or whatever, like that's that's just the world we're in today. But I just anticipate that question coming up. So.
Julian.
Yeah, when it comes to ITS, I haven't been through civil engineering or traffic engineering classes at school, but I'm just wondering like how much can we use technology to kind of create how can we use technology to resolve the issue of just the space that cars take up? they just take up a lot of space. And in a totally congested environment, as is Front Street, during the evenings, I'm just kind of skeptical about how much we can actually resolve that issue of space and how many cars I-90 just dumps onto the Front Street, and especially if that Front Street interchange is still being planned. I just don't know how that issue of space can be resolved. So my idea of ITS is something that can help us, use image analytics and stuff like that, helping people get around town in modes that are not by car. But I guess that's just a question, like how can we resolve that issue of space with technology?
And those are really good questions. I can't say that I have an answer to that, on how the technology could be used for specifically for space. But that is something that we can definitely ask to our consultants.
I'm not seeing any other comments, and Isabel, did you have any more specific? Did you want to probe on anything, or did you get useful information?
No, I would just only add, I know we have mentioned during what we have heard, I heard the desire to providing maybe expanding this to provide input more of a community level. It's that is not currently part of the scope of the plan, but this is something we can evaluate and discuss if it's something that we would be able to accomplish too. So this is something good for further discussion too. Yes, and other than that, yeah, if there aren't any other questions.
I mean, like I said, I just really want to get at the premise of the ITS projects and making sure that we're actually that the issues that are being, or like the challenges that we're facing can actually be resolved with the use of technology and making sure that, it's not intrusive or too expensive for what the benefits will be, especially in such a congested environment. So I feel like if we engage the community, a lot of them will be saying, Issaquah Hobart, Issaquah Hobart, Issaquah Hobart. But I'm just not convinced that technology can solve that conundrum. So
Just before we close, I'm just going to say I totally agree with you, Julian, but it's not going to solve the problem. But I still think that if there are inexpensive ways, and I think technology falls into that general bucket where people think it's a lot less expensive than capital projects, to maximize what we do have. I think that that's something to consider. But you're right. If you alleviate the congestion, it's just going to fill up again with new people. I mean, it's not going to go away, but I still think that there's, I think if there is a way to get the most of what we have, I think that's worth pursuing. But I don't think it should be done at the exclusion of other kinds of ITS used for pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, other of our mobility goals. So I see you struggling with this, and I'm struggling with it too, because I just don't believe we can build our way or smart our way out of congestion. I think we're all struggling with that all the time, but I also think that any win to maximize the use of the infrastructure is, I don't know why we'd be opposed to that. All comes down to priorities, I suppose.
yeah, I mean, I don't have any objections to what you said. I just think that that the team has to know like what the benefits will be against the costs and stuff like that. So
yeah. Okay. Thanks for that.
And
Sounds like we're
Cynthia,
ready to move on to concurrency, which
yes,
is our last regular meaty substantive topic for the evening, right?
yes. But before we do that, I noticed there is someone on the attendee list that seems to be someone from the public, and I don't know at what moment this person joined, but I just want to ask if we want to give the opportunity to provide a public comments if that's the case.
Are you asking if we think it's okay to stop and accept public comment now? Yeah, that's fine. We want more and more is always better, but I have a feeling it's Tom.
Yes, it was Tom, but then when I accepted Tom, I noticed someone else was
Ah.
on the call. So
Okay, so I guess that's so yes, we are reopening public comment, and if there's somebody online that would like to make a public comment, we are happy to make an exception and reopen public comment.
okay,
We're allowed
so okay, Mary Lynch, I am going to unmute you now. If you are willing to provide a public comment, you can do so now.
Hi, thank you. This is Mary Lynch, and I, like Christy, served on the Central Area Plan. So I also just want to support what she was saying about the overpass, project that's planned or projected for I-90. And also something that didn't come up is even though the pedestrian pathway along S900 was commented on, that is not a safe passage with boardwalks, and also because you have to cross the exit coming off of west or eastbound I-90. That is a very dangerous crossing. And then also the interchange, and even though they're supposed to be redoing it over by where S900 goes into East Lake Sammamish. So because of what the density of the downtown area and all, that's why that was proposed as part of the Central Area Plan. The other thing you were just talking about is the electronic systems. I was a proponent of that and have been for a long time. If any of you use the Newport Way Lakemont interchange, Bellevue a number of years ago put their system to work there. And if you use that, you'll realize that you don't wait long. If there is nobody at the opposing lights, you get a green light and can go. Where most of the time when I'm going to work in the morning, trying to cross Front Street is impossible. I sit there and there's no cars, or a lot of times there's no cars coming the other way. And if I want to go straight on Sunset, I have to wait, sometimes almost a minute to 2 minutes, which again, when there's no opposing traffic, seems ridiculous. And there's a lot of lights like that within the city that what that will do for you is, for the local people, is to eliminate that wait time and that frustration. So that's one of the reasons I've been a proponent of this for a long time in getting the city updated. Also, I do use the camera system, and I wish the city did have more cameras on their interchange, because especially when it snows, I go on and use that. And I actually drive school bus right now for the Issaquah School District. And it's really convenient to go on there if there's snow or been an accident. You can get on those cameras, and I do plan on how, and I give that input to the transportation routers, letting them know where traffic is backed up or where there's been an accident. So, enhancing the cameras around the city, I think people already are using that. And if they were made easier to access for the public, I think they would use them more and would help the local traffic get around more. So in the future. So I think some of the things you're talking about are good. The other thing I wanted to bring up, unfortunately, I thought the TIP was going to be discussed later versus earlier, so that's messed me up. So I really didn't hear a lot about that discussion. But one of the things I really hope that the city stresses is to improve and bring sidewalks to areas where they've been promised for years versus redoing sidewalks and intersections, i.e. the intersection at Second and Sunset has been redone, I think 5 or 6 times in the last 15 years. And sidewalks have been redone. And no priority given to those areas where there are no sidewalks, i.e. there's proposed to redo the sidewalk from the skate park to 12th. Well, those are existing sidewalks that are working well, but there's a lot of places in the city where we don't have sidewalks or bicycle paths that I hope that the priority for funding is given to those over redoing intersections and redoing, sidewalks to bring them up to some sort of standard if they already exist. But I just want to thank you all for your time and volunteerism. I've been around here and trying to, improve mobility by foot and bicycle and safety for years. So I appreciate your volunteering on this board. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Mary, and
you.
thank you, Isabel, for noticing.
All right.
Sounds like with that,
so-
we're on to concurrency.
Yes, we are. And I'll go back again to sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? The right one?
Yes.
Okay. Well, just then for the record, again, I'm Isabel Diaz, Traffic Signal Operations Engineer, and now I will be speaking about the concurrency update that the city will be doing this year. As part of the topics that I'll be discussing, I'll first give a brief overview of what concurrency is, what our concurrency requirements and policies are, and what the update process for concurrency looks like. And then we would provide a very brief overview of the next steps for the concurrency update. What is concurrency? I am going to give my best shot at explaining what concurrency is. I know there is a lot of technical information here, so if there's anyone with any questions, I will try my best to answer those, and let me know if anyone needs anything to be explained further. Concurrency is defined as the timely provision of improvements or strategies to accommodate development impacts to an adopted level of service standards, concurrent with development. What we mean with concurrent with development, hence the name for concurrency, is at the time that the development occurs, or within a specified period of time, which is typically 6 years in alignment with our CIP or TIP process. Concurrency is required by state law as one of the goals of the Growth Management Act. Some old local governments have the flexibility on how we apply concurrency requirements. And to that note, the city in Issaquah, per our code, we do have some exemptions of the type of developments that need to be required from concurrency. And those exceptions are low-income housings, buildings or structures that are constructed by regional transit, city projects, reconstruction of a building that is destroyed by an accident, like an example of fire, an explosion, or any other type of accident. When there is a caveat to that, it is when the number of trips that are generated after the reconstruction is equal to or less than it was before. And also the change of use to an existing building. The building is already built and it's just changing from one business to another. They are not required they are not abiding by, they should not be by the concurrency requirements. However, we need to know that even though these are exemptions, one thing that is important to remind is that we still adjust the available capacity generated by those developments. Even when they are exempt from paying the fees and things like that, but that doesn't mean that we don't or we won't be tracking the growth that occurs with these type of developments. This growth still need to be considered with the with concurrency. We still need to track them. So a little bit of the concurrency history in Issaquah. In the early 2000s, concurrency was measured based on link, measurement that we call V/C, which means volume to capacity. This means that we will be getting a roadway segment, and during that, for that segment, we will be measuring the volume that goes through that segment against the capacity, and that's what we typically call it V/C. Because of that, back then, this concurrency method of measurement that we used to have was considered multimodal, and the level of service of the links or of the roadways was based on the functional classification of it. That would measure the level of service standard. And the one the one problem that we had with the concurrency system back then is that the standards and the mitigation requirements were not consistent with the SIPA process. And then the other thing was that multiple models were needed to be run inevitable on a regular basis. And so it made it a little bit complicated. This concurrency process was a lot of work, and it was a little bit complicated and hard to track, not having that consistency with the SIPA process. Then we moved in the 2000, a new concurrency methodology was approved, and which started to be applied on 2010. The new things that we did with the other concurrency system is that we changed from a link-based to an intersection-based level of service. The way that the reason why we did that is also to be consistent with the highway capacity manual system as well. And the problem that we had with this new system helped us to have the SIPA and the concurrency processes combined. So that would solve the issue that we had with the initial system. But then by doing that and only having this intersection level of service capacity, we lost the multimodal element of the concurrency system. So this is why we changed into this newer system on the between the 2013 and 17. And it's the current system that we are using right now. This current system is multimodal, and I'll explain a little bit more into that later. Why is that? And we are keeping the intersection level of service, which is something that I'll explain later a little bit more, what this intersection level of service means. And we kept it to be consistent with the highway capacity manual. The difference, what made it, bringing it back to multimodal, is that we included new impact fees that are based on land use, and I will share a little bit more of that as well later on. The one of the things of this newer concurrency system is that it was easier to implement, where we would be basing the traffic impact fees based on the land use that the development will be using. The fundamentals for the existing concurrency system that is in place right now includes, as I mentioned before, a multimodal component, an intersection-based level of service based on the highway capacity manual. It helps that it helps us with providing periodic model updates. And the city, with this new system, the city does the analysis to determine the improvements and the available trips for capacity. Instead of having the developer, instead of having developer make improvement based on traffic impact analysis, then the developer would simply be paying fees. And the fees are on a first come, first served basis on available trips. And then again, instead of having that developer dictating what the impacts or improvements are needed to be done and how much they would cost. So we are the ones determining that. The caveat to that, though, is that the development must be consistent with the model assumptions, in terms of its size, the type, and location of assumed growth. In addition to the concurrency management section in our code, the Ordinance 2877 includes the latest adopted impact fee and bicycle pedestrian mitigation fees. And this is what allows us to provide improvements that also accounts for the bicycle and pedestrian traffic. 2 years ago, the TAP has helped the directing staff through the mobility master plan and to update the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. And among the policies that are related to concurrency, one of them was to build the central Issaquah plan using concurrency fees collected from development and to make improvements to concurrency intersections to ensure that they operate at the level of service standards. And this is providing that these improvements wouldn't degrade conditions for the travelers and are affordable to the city. Why do we need an update for concurrency? The city manages concurrency by determining the available capacity and recording the remaining capacity in a trip bank, what we call a trip bank, with each approved application. That means that every time that first and foremost, the available capacity is recorded every time we do an update. We have this available capacity, and with every new application that comes in and it gets approved concurrency, this available capacity will be removed from the trip bank or reserved. We can say that it is reserved for that development. As more development comes in, we are slowly accumulating that capacity that was available at the time of the update. Per our code, the city has to update or make that available capacity of make concurrency updates when one of the three things occur that are presented on this slide. One of them is because of changes in the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. That would trigger a change in the a concurrency update. And it's specifically when these changes are related to concurrency management. When more than 50% of that cumulative capacity has been reserved, with the most recent approved concurrency application, or after 3 years of the most recent update. Our latest update was done in 2017, so it was about time that we did a concurrency update right when the pandemic started. So this is probably the main reason why we wouldn't make sense to do an update back in 2020 when the pandemic started. Traffic volumes were significantly different. We didn't know how traffic would look like. It wouldn't reflect what our normal conditions would be. And now that traffic is getting kind of back to speed, we are in this place that we are ready to do the concurrency update now. We have mentioned, we have heard a lot of what level of service is, intersection level of service. And to kind of give a brief idea of what this level of service means, the level of service is defined by the Highway Capacity Manual, but assigning a grade that ranges from A to F based on average delay of the intersections. And these average delay ranges in values depending on whether the intersection is controlled by a traffic signal or a stop sign. So the values of the average delays to bring or give a level of service would depend or vary if it's controlled by a signal or a stop sign. From level of service A are ideal conditions. We could say free flow, and changing from level service A, B, C, and D would still be tolerable conditions or stable flows. For this level of service, if you put it on an example, like if you were on a signalized intersections, vehicles are probably getting through the intersection without having to wait through more than one cycle. This is kind of the example, the day-to-day example that we could give of what on a traffic signal, the level of service A through D would look like. With the level of service E, you can say that the intersection is approaching capacity. Some of the movements may be waiting through more than one signal cycle to be able to get through the signal. For level service F, it means that the intersection is over capacity, and we are starting to experience congestion conditions. We are waiting more than one signal cycle, perhaps, and we are having long queues, the term that David had mentioned before, which is it's kind of the lines of vehicles that we can have on the traffic. Issaquah has 84 concurrency intersections, and the intersection level of service standard is level of service D, except for 6 intersections that can operate at a lower level of service as long, and this is the kind of complicated term, there are 6 intersections that can operate at lower level service as long as the weighted average of all the other, all the concurrency intersections citywide is maintained at level of service D. And those intersections, the 6 intersections that could operate at a lower level of service are already identified. Those are Northwest Sammamish Road with 12th and 19th Avenues, SR 900 with I-90 eastbound ramps, SR 900 Untitled Drive, Sunset Way and Front Street, Issaquah Falls City Road and Black Nugget, and Issaquah Falls City Road and Highlands. those are the 6 intersections that could operate at level of service D or E based on Issaquah concurrency standards, as long as the combined level of service for all the intersections remains as D at the standard level of service standard. When we do a concurrency model update, we evaluate 3 different scenarios. One of the scenarios is the existing, where we would be getting the 2022 traffic volumes this year. And this model would take the existing traffic volumes, but also the existing land use, what is currently on the city, what the different uses and developments that are currently at the city. This existing model would also include a percentage of other modes of travel. And this is the percentage that John was mentioning earlier on his presentation. This percentage is based on PSRC data. And these other modes percentage is used not only for the existing, it is also used for these future or base that I will talk a little bit more about. And we also do calibration for the existing model. And I'll talk a little bit more on what calibration means later during the presentation. Oh, I noticed it's 7:54, Cynthia. I don't know if you have been wanting to tell me that.
I was just wondering how we were doing. I was actually just gonna go back and look at the work program and just see, like, yeah, so maybe do a time check and tell me what you're thinking.
I have 3 slides, including this one. Let me know if you would rather go like quickly through them or just stop and go through the work plan and other items.
I just have a pretty close to hard stop at 8. I don't know what the rest of the crew has, so I have a philosophy, but also today I have a close to a pretty hard stop. I can maybe go 5 more minutes, but I try hard to stick to the plan. I saw an odd or two, but
yeah, and I have no issues coming back on our next meeting and try to briefly go through this.
I guess the other thing is I feel like there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here, some of which may be some policy stuff that we might have. And I was just kind of going back to see, was this informational? Could you tell us, maybe just remind us, what we can, what our contribution is here, what the timing is for needing that, and if there's the time to bring it back, because I have a bunch of questions, and I bet other people have questions, and then there's just our opinions, and I feel like we're just, yeah, to do this justice, it'd take a lot more than the next 5 minutes.
Okay, and that would be better explained with this slide here. And as you mentioned, this is an informational item, and we will be doing like model updates. But one of the things that we will do is assess the status. This is where we compare the level of service conditions city on the city with the most recent update that was done. This is the time that we would, depending on what the results are, this is the time that decisions need to be made, like where and if needed, and this is only if we get worse than what we currently are. If that's not the case, then we don't have any problem. We can continue. We don't have any action to take. But if we do get with the results, we do find that more intersections are not at level of service, then this is the time that we will need to get back to the board report and get feedback on how to move on before.
And
going
when
to
would that
council.
happen? When would that be happening?
Well, that's a tricky one because we are right now we are currently gathering information. We can work on the existing model, but for the future model to do the future ones, we are awaiting for information from the PSRC model, and it would happen sometime this year, but we don't know for sure when is that gonna be. So we will start working on the existing. We think a couple of months we will have that data, but we don't know exactly when. So this could be an item that depending on we could either come back to report to provide an update and do a report, and if we need to make decisions, then we will definitely come back with that feedback from the tab.
I feel like this
So-
concept would require a whole retreat or something. It's such an involved.
It is very complicated, and to be honest, it was really difficult to try to put this on a presentation because there is a lot of information. It is.
It's also super loaded, and I bet everybody has a lot of opinions about level of service. Yeah, and I bet everybody in the community has opinions, even if they don't know what these technical terms mean. So, do we can we pick up where we left off in the next meeting? I don't remember what's on the agenda for the next meeting, but would we be able to do that?
We could. We have a couple of items on the board work plan, but those are floating. These are items that can still float around, and we need confirmation from other staff members as well. So this is something that we can accommodate on our next meeting.
I only because the presentation still up, I can't see everyone at the same time.
I'm sorry.
But no, that's okay. That's okay. I wanted to know how others were feeling about this. Some people may feel the time constraint is arbitrary, but I am fairly committed to ending on time. But I'm wondering, on the other hand, we just got to the really good stuff there. Tom, you're talking, but I can't hear you. I can see your lips moving. And I can see you smiling. Is anyone else hearing Tom? You can hear us.
Does that work now?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
now I can hear you.
Oh, no, okay, good. I have 5 choices, so I just went through each one of the choices. I think this would be good for following up with the next meeting, and so that everybody else knows is the concurrency is also tied to the PSRC, and all the other communities are all tied together with the forecast. So what we do in our city also affects some of the other cities and the whole transportation component as a whole. So
Yes, we'll bring it again on the next meeting.
So in terms of policy, are we going to make any recommendations at some point or anything like that?
No, what we are doing right now is only the capacity update. That update that we are required to do. But having said that, that doesn't mean that we might not need to make some decisions or go with council to council for recommendations, depending on what we find out with the results.
But in 2023 plus, there might be some point, some kind of recommendation about LOS standard or something like that, right? Related.
Well, not for the standard update. What we are doing is the capacity. If at some point we feel like we need to update the standard, that's more of a broader conversation that we need to, and it wouldn't be part of this concurrency update. It would be for something else.
Okay.
I think we
Much
should
more long
take,
range. Yeah.
yeah, I think we should have a conversation about what we want from the tab in this update, and then also acknowledge that I'm sensing, and Julian and I are probably not the only ones, that where this leads in the future. Like, it wouldn't it be nice if we really understood this update, so we take time to really understand it, but then really be kind of noodling on the future. So I think that's why we don't want to just kind of blow past it, because I think we're all sensing that maybe this isn't the last time important decisions are going to have to be made about policies and
Yeah, and the main
Concurrency is
idea is to try. Sorry, go ahead.
well, yeah, concurrency is like the central piece of transportation policy, so it's super important that we don't blow past it. So
Yes, you are all very correct, and this is why we want to make sure, or try to do the best of try to do our best to the tab can understand the topic in case that important decisions need to be made in the future.
you're doing a good job. It's just it's just a dense thing, and we kind of left it to the end. So don't be discouraged. And I think people are just really interested, but we want to give it the due time. So
Yeah, thank you.
would it be okay? Did we stop at an okay stopping point? Could we go ahead and come back? Okay. If that's the case, then now I have to bounce to my other. I'm missing my extra screens. Oh, so that brings us to the board work plan then. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yes, about that. Now we are bringing back the concurrency topic on June. On June, there are a couple of things we have, like title. They have still on the shelf to discuss, which is Title 18, Parking and Circulation, Northwest Sammamish Road Project, and those are, and the transit study. Those are things that I'll need to check in with other staff members to see if we have an update to provide. And the other interesting topic that we were planning on bringing, hoping to have that in person, but maybe not gonna be the case, was the Open Public Meetings and Public Records Act training, which is a good reminder that even though we are not having new members on the tab, it would be a good opportunity to provide these reminders for training.
Hey, real quick, I wonder if we could all just recertify that we do the self-certified one and then take that off. I don't know what the clerk says about that, but I remember there's a self-certify and that you're looking, maybe I did that for a different government job, but I thought there was a way to self-certify that you've read everything.
In July, it looks pretty light, so maybe that's a month that we could do the Public Records Act information and update too.
I haven't heard about that self-certified, but that's something I can ask clerk.
Anything else on the board work plan?
No, that's
Okay.
the main thing.
Could
Gosh, this
I-
is toggling back and, oh, go ahead.
could I ask a question? So if we're delaying the concurrency to June, it seems like it's going to be even a much busier meeting in June. Is there going to be any delays?
No worries. Not necessarily, because those topics we still need to check with staff, which has been the case that might not be ready for to present at this time. I wouldn't think that anything would be delayed or not being discussed, and we won't try to pack the meeting either with topics to discuss.
Yeah, there's a couple items on there which really should not be
Yeah.
delayed. So.
Do you have a staff report?
Oh, for the staff report, the only thing I had, well, we already introduced you all to the team, but the only thing I had is you may have already seen that email that we were hoping to start our in-person meetings on June, but given the high occurrence of COVID cases that we have seen almost everywhere, we will be delaying that for another month, and we will be starting to meet in person in July now.
Thank you. Boy, this toggling back and forth is not how I like to do things. Okay, so I don't have a report. I already shared all the remarks I wanted to share with you all, and Joseph is not here, so I assume there is no youth report. Do we have any other business or announcements?
I just want to say thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Isabel, for getting the connection to hook up.
Thank you. We can't hear you,
Well,
Cynthia.
sorry,
Okay.
sorry. Too many buttons. Did you have any other announcements? Anyone else have any other announcements? Okay, welcome show. And thank you all for your time and your energy. I look forward to one more meeting. I didn't realize we were kicking to July. That's a bummer, but we can do it. We've done it before.
Just one more.
We can wait one more month. Okay. Thank you guys. Thanks everyone so much. Have a good evening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.